Hey, it's Drybear. Back again with our Diablo 4 build guide, and I've been getting tons of comments and questions on my stream to focus on some blood builds for Necromancer. So today we're going to talk about the first one, which is Blood Lance, which I'm calling the Crimson Impaler. The concept of Blood Lance was super strong in Diablo 3 and a lot of fun for single target, and there's some options for AoE in Diablo 4 as well, so that's what we're getting into today. But first, you should come hang out with me on my live stream. I'm live every single day on twitch.tv/Drybear. If you don't come hang out with me and the community, the next time you go to the beach, the first thing you're gonna feel on your toes when you go in the water is lots of seaweed. Let's get started in the guide. This is the Crimson Impaler Necro with a focus on Blood Lance. This is a blood-based build, and I think with all blood-based builds with Necro, you're gonna want to go more towards fortify and overpower damage because there's just so much synergy between blood, fortify, self-healing, being healthy, and bonus damage from that it just fits perfectly. So this build plus Blood Nova builds or Blood Surge builds I think work great for overpower. There probably is some hybrid builds between bone and blood that don't focus on being tanky and doing overpower, but also I've had a lot of requests for doing more of a sustain tanky blood build, so this is going to be the first one. If you're looking for the full build sheet, it's down below in the description. I have created the full build on d4builds.gg, so you can find a full skill build, all the skilled setups, the abilities, the minions, all of the legendaries, including the ancient, as well as a first pass at the Paragon board. Again, these Paragon boards are a little bit hard to nail down until we get a full extent of what all the endgame content is going to be and how it feels to clear the content. A lot of these boards may need to change if we need more defensives to survive some of the content that we just haven't experienced yet, and vice versa, or if there's other options or things that change. But this is just a theory crafting first pass on what a Blood Lance Crimson Impaler would use for Paragon, and just so you have it as your reference sheet if you want to use this build for your Necromancer. We'll start with the builder, as we always do, to talk about how you build your passive resource for Necromancer. That is Essence, and we're going to be using Hemorrhage. There isn't, like, you could actually run most of these for this build, but I think there's actually a lot of value in having Hemorrhage for a few reasons. Anytime you run an overpower / fortify build, the tankier you are, the more damage you deal, because your damage scaling comes off the fact that you remain at a healthy health percentage, so almost max at all times, which means you need good self-sustain, and also you need fortify, which is a self-shielding effect. And if that shield gets damaged and reduced and removed, you lose your benefit and you lose your overpower damage scaling. So the tankier you are, the more damage you deal with overpower builds. That's why the mechanic was created in the first place, so that it wasn't just glass cannon builds that cleared the hardest content. You had other options. So Hemorrhage is great. It is a blood skill, so all of our blood scaling effects are great. It also has a chance to form a blood orb, and we do like that because it gives us self-sustain, and there's some legendaries that proc off blood orb consumption, as well as us getting damage scaling on our Paragon board for getting blood orbs as well. We're gonna get, so when you pick up a blood orb, your next Hemorrhage also deals damage around your target and gives more essence, a little bit of AoE benefit there. And I think for this, you can probably get attack speed, though you could also get fortify if you feel like you're not getting enough fortify here. I just tend to lean towards attack speed on your builders because it means that you can reposition and you can use them more fluidly. But it's very possible that you don't have enough fortify in the build, and if that's the case, you can get Initiate's Hemorrhage for that extra fortify. Next, for our core skills, you always want to consider Imperfectly Balanced and Unliving Energy for most builds because they fit into all builds unless you don't run a core ability. So we're going to get 1 point in here because there are a lot of blood passives later on in the tree that require a lot of skill points. For this build specifically, we can't get a lot of free skill points, so we're just going to get 1 extra point here, and then we'll pick up Blood Lance. This is a channeling ability that fires off blood lances. They linger in the enemy and they deal damage to all other lanced enemies. So it's almost like a paintbrush. It's kind of like how it functioned in Diablo 3. You want to paint and get a whole bunch of blood lances out and then focus single target on a blood lance. And the single target opportunity for this build is actually exceptionally high, especially once you have high resource generation. We're gonna get the modifier so that blood lance pierces through enemies who are already lanced. So you hit the first enemy, when you fire another blood lance, it goes through that first enemy and then hits the enemy, and then it keeps traveling through. So you actually get not only great single target, but that single target builds up and gets more and more AoE for mobbing scenarios. And then we also want, when 2 are enemies or a boss are affected by blood lance, you gain attack speed and the essence cost is reduced. Again, you have an option here for guaranteed overpower. I feel like you probably don't need this. This may feel better early on, but once you get enough gear and tankiness to manage your overpower, I feel like this option is going to be better just because not only does it give you attack speed, but the bigger thing here is that it lowers the essence cost of Bloodlance by 3 per cast, and that's huge. That means you can maintain Bloodlance for longer, and I have a feeling that once you get full build, maxed out endgame, you might be able to just freely channel Bloodlance for the most part, aside from using cooldowns, which would be really awesome. Next, into the next tree, the defensive tree, we're going to pick up Blood Mist. This one works great in all builds. It's also one of my favorite defensive abilities. It's kind of like Jaunt or the Ghost Walk from Witch Doctor in D3, but you become untargetable, which is excellent. You can avoid big AoEs, lots of very unfortunate positions with this because you just turn into a pile of blood and avoid it. It gives you movement speed reduction, but you also heal and deal damage. So the healing is great for any fortified build. Again, the healthier we are, the more damage we deal. We want to be tanky, we want to be sustained. You also modify it so that a skill that overpowers, which we're going to be doing constantly, it reduces the cooldown of Blood Mist. You can actually get this reset very quickly and very easily if you have good overpower. And then you also get Fortify out of it. So not only do you become immune, untargetable, but for those 3 seconds, you're generating health and generating Fortify for that, which makes this build awesome because all of the incoming damage stops. You're healing and fortifying, which raises your overall healthiness, gets you back in that healthy territory, and keeps you going and keeps your damage high. This is huge. Blood Mist is a must-have. Now, there's an open slot in this build for something. You could run Corpse Tendrils. You could run maybe even a double Curse. What I recommend, actually, what felt the best to me when I was testing this build was Bone Prison. The reason I like this is when you put down the Bone Prison, you will trap enemies inside and get essence. It means you can channel your Blood Lance for longer, but also for the enemies that are trapped inside, you fortify. So you can create a wall which blocks projectiles. It can reposition melee. It can reroute melee, which keeps you safer, and in many situations can keep you from taking damage entirely. And if you trap enemies inside, you can create essence, which allows you to channel and fortify yourself for more overpowered damage. All that works great together. I think the more you get used to Bone Prison, the more you see the value for it in this build specifically and generally in most builds. Coming up next is Iron Maiden. This can swap out for a comfort pick. Again, I think there is some synergy with Corpse Tendrils. The only reason I don't like running Corpse Tendrils in a non-corpse build is because on bosses, generating corpses is kind of a pain. And if you don't account for that in the build, while you can kill enemies and use their corpses to pull in when mobbing, I feel like this is a waste of a skill in boss scenarios because you just can't maintain it. So for me, I like slotting in Iron Maiden because it will give you a little bit of damage. But on top of that, you can make it so that it gives you essence back and doesn't cost essence, which gives you more time to channel your Blood Lance. All of that uptime is really great. And on top of that, you heal for each enemy that dies while affected by Iron Maiden. So in mobbing scenarios, you can maintain that healthy state a lot easier. We'll see later when we get into legendaries and passives, the longer you're in healthy state, high HP, the more damage you deal, the more benefits you get. So the more health you have coming in when you're in a risky situation, the higher chance you stay healthy. And it also prevents you from losing your Fortify too much because you're kind of keeping all that healthiness coming in, which is great. So that's what you're going to pick up there for the curse option. When you come down here, if you're going for a Corpse Tendril variant, you can pick that up here, and you can also get it so it drops blood orbs, which is useful for this build, but that's going to be your option there. Next, in the Macabre tree, we're going to pick up almost all of the blood builds here. In this build, I do recommend running Skeletal Mages, but you do kind of want them to die. So in this case, I actually don't run Transfusion. Blood orbs heal your minions, and you really don't need that. You just kind of want the Blood Mages to be kind of sacrificing themselves, creating fortification and that sort of thing. So I don't run this, but all the rest are excellent for Fortify, Overpower blood builds. This one gives it, when you're low HP, you receive more healing, which gets you back to a healthy state faster. When you are healthy, your blood skills deal more. Again, we want to stay healthy for as long as possible. Blood skills deal more damage. Your blood skills deal increased overpower damage, and it's double bonus if you're healthy. Again, we want to stay healthy. And drain vitality, you have a lucky hit chance when hitting enemies with blood skills to fortify yourself for life. What's great for this is when you have high hit rate abilities like Blood Lance and Hemorrhage that are hitting so constantly, lucky hit becomes pretty valuable because you have a chance to trigger that. So every percentage of lucky hit you get becomes more viable because, you know, if you were hitting very slowly, you would need a much higher lucky hit. But if you're hitting constantly for that 25% chance, then you get extra Fortify from it, which is really nice. And again, I have a feeling that when you're full build, you should be able to get some pretty nasty tankiness out of this while you're also dishing out massive damage. Since we're running a blood build, we pick the Blood Legendary Blood Wave. This one has so much awesome synergy with this. Giant tidal wave of blood, knocks back enemies, does decent damage, has a very short cooldown of 50 seconds at base, which is huge. But also, you can slow enemies, put them in that crowd control category, and the creme de la creme is this one here. Every time you blood wave, you leave behind 3 blood orbs. Remember that. We're spawning blood orbs with our ultimate every time we use it. We're spawning, we have a chance to spawn blood orbs with our hemorrhage as well, and we have some other ways to proc blood orbs as we put down, but that gives us not only damage and survivability, but some other procs as well. In this case, I think you can run standalone. We're going to be running with skeletal mages, which does reduce its effectiveness, but realistically, you just want the Memento Mori, which gives you, which I'm just now realizing, the Blood Nova build is the one we run skeletals in. I was wondering why this was here in the first place. So no minions in this build, not in this one at all. I have a different blood build that will use minions, but this one doesn't. And because of that, if you're not running any minions, then standalone and Memento Mori become very valuable. You get high damage reduction, again, great for healthy, overpower, fortify builds. And you also get increased bonus from the mages. So again, no minions in this one. I made this one at the same time that I made the Blood Surge, the Blood Nova build. And so I was just getting that mixed up. So no minions in this one. We're going to pick up these two. And then we're, of course, going to come down and get Wrathman's Vigor for our key passive. Increase maximum life by 10%, and after being healthy for 15 seconds, your next blood skill overpowers. Again, another reason why we need to maintain healthy for as long as possible. If we can always be healthy, every 15 seconds, our next blood skill overpowers, which gives us more proc benefits, other things like that. So that's going to be the skill tree here. Down below in the description is the link to this. Let's go over the minions, and then we'll jump into the legendaries that you can use with this build. So with the minions, I would sacrifice all of them. I think if you're not going to maintain, tankiness for them, it's hard to keep them alive, and you do want the extra benefits there. And I think you can actually fit all these in the build and not have to worry about keeping minions in there. I think you can get the crit chance coming out from skirmishers by sacrificing them. Crit chance is excellent because you really get a benefit from an overpower, because you can crit overpower as well. That's your super special number. You can also get magic resistance if you want to sacrifice the defenders, if you feel like you need that extra defense. Bone Mage sacrifice is huge, almost required for this. Your overpower damage is increased by 40%, which is massive. I have a feeling they're going to reduce this once we get full overpower builds. I feel like this is too big of a number, but it's hard to pass up when you have this going on here. And then for the last, you're going to sacrifice your Blood Golem, because that will allow you to increase your maximum life, which means that you have more HP to play with as a resource. You can maintain healthy for longer. There are options here to get a little more tankiness and split damage. If you really want to run Golem and maybe you swap out Bone Prison or you swap out Iron Maiden, that is an option for you. You can even have it, spawn corpses as well, which you can get with, corpse tendrils if you wanted that. But I think this one, maximum life, makes this build feel even better. Next for gems, it is an overpower build, so we like getting Ruby in the weapon for overpower damage, another massive scaler there. Max life for armor, which is really good, and then armor for your jewelry, which gives you more survivability. You can maintain your healing as well. You can also run skulls and armor for healing received. I just think max life is just so much better because healthy is calculated on a percent HP, so the more your actual value of HP is, the more your max life is, the easier it is to maintain a healthy state, because you have more true value of HP between 100% and the cutoff for healthy. Let's jump into legendaries, and there is going to be at least one unique in this. I like including uniques because it is an end game option, but also tells you what you're working towards the end of the game. These are going to be end game options. They'll be running with yellows and legendaries if you find them while leveling, but just think about this coming down the pipe, which I think is cool to think about. The unique is going to be Ring of Starless Skies. I like this one a lot for any channeling build. Each consecutive core skill, Bloodlance is a core skill, reduces the resource cost of your next core skill by a certain percent up to a maximum of 40%. So the longer you're channeling Bloodlance, the cheaper Bloodlance becomes on essence cost. And remember, we also ran with Paranormal Bloodlance, which means that Bloodlance's essence cost is reduced when we have multiple enemies that are lanced or we're dealing with a boss. So a flat essence reduction just with Bloodlance in general, especially on bosses, add this on top of it, and you get such a nice reduction. You can just sit there and just throw out blood lances, just hold the button down like a machine gun, murdering everyone in sight. So very big pickup there. Now let's look at the legendaries to talk about what's in here. Again, it is a fortify healing build, so we're going to want a decent amount of defense in here. I think Aspect of Disobedience is great for the helm slot. You can also get the unique that allows you to get damage reduction on Harlequin. This one works in basically every build. It's super good, but is an option there. And I think the damage reduction and armor is also really nice for this build. Aspect of Might means that when you use Hemorrhage, you get damage reduction. Again, more tankiness. For gloves, when Blood Lance hits an enemy that is already lanced, it has a chance to fire a Blood Lance at a nearby enemy. I wasn't able to test this if this works on a boss, right? If there's only one mob on your screen and you get this proc from Hungry Blood, does that just shoot a Blood Lance at the same target, or does it not do anything? Without that question, this may have less effectiveness against a boss, and we'll have to test that once we have the real game to figure out, but just keep an eye on that. I think this works great for mobbing and clearing dungeons, but there may be a question of whether or not this works if there's only one target available. I wasn't able to get a definitive answer on that one. Aspect of the Crowded Sage is great for almost any build where you're going to be in melee range of any kind, but heal for X life per second for each close enemy up to a maximum. And if this works great for bosses, when you're close by, you can get this extra little bit here. And this one also works great for a Blood Surge build. For boots, we get Torturous Aspect. Enemies afflicted by your Iron Maiden have a chance to be stunned. This one is kind of, I feel like boots is kind of free. You could get Wind Striker, which is always good. If you have any kind of crit, this works great for bone builds. You can even get some extra scaling off Penitent if you want if you can find that drop for unique. But this is just kind of an easy pickup. If you're running Iron Maiden, the stun is nice for any targets that can be stunned. The super nice weapon option here is Blood Lance deals extra damage to its primary target per lanced enemy. Against bosses that have adds, if you have lances everywhere, your main target takes more damage. And in mobbing situations where you're killing elites and their mobs everywhere, and you just paintbrush your screen for Blood Lance and then focus on one target, you get a nice damage increase for that. Overall, I think the value on this is really good. Aspect of Rasmus Chosen makes it so blood skills overpower. When they overpower, and you're going to be overpowering constantly, you gain attack speed. Attack speed is very good for builder spender builds because it makes your hemorrhage faster, which means you build essence faster. It also means you spam Blood Lance faster, which means you'll stack up Ring of Starless Skies faster. All of that feels really good. And it also means that you can reposition. You can shoot and then reposition and get away from danger, avoid something, shoot again. It makes it feel much more fluid when you're doing these kind of caster builds. Starlight Aspect is one that I think is super good for any overpower build. You gain primary resource for each 25% of your life that you heal. So think about how tanky you become and how fast you become and how much you can generate essence and reduce the cost of Blood Lance. Eventually, you'll get to the point where as you're consuming blood orbs and dealing with all that kind of nastiness, you get healed and healed and healed. You'll start generating a resource from your natural tankiness, which means you can channel Blood Lance even longer. And then lastly, crit strikes with core skills increase your attack speed. You're not going to be going full crit here, but you just need a crit every couple seconds with how fast you're hitting to get attack speed. And again, attack speed is great for this build. So those are legendaries and the uniques and the gems, the jewelry that you want for this available. And the last thing we'll cover for this is going to be the Paragon board. Again, disclaimer on this, there's going to be a lot of questions on what challenges we face at endgame, what we will actually need, how easy these glyphs are to get, and if there's, stat restrictions or stat requirements. These Paragon boards will likely change a lot once we get to fully experience endgame properly once the game is live. But for now, I wanted to leave you guys with at least a first draft on what this might look like so that when you hit 50, you unlock Paragon, you have something to go off of, you have a baseline, there's plenty of synergy in this. This would be an okay or fine Paragon build for the Crimson Impaler. So at least you have something to reference for when you play the game if you decide to run with this build. So we're gonna start with our basic board here. I do like getting Imbiber on this. Increased damage while healthy because we like having that. And as long as you have 25 willpower in the glyph range, you get increased potion healing, which allows you to maintain having your overpower state for longer. I like getting the damage, armor, and defense, as well as the percent damage here for this. Remember, for Necromancer, dexterity gives crit, which we don't care about too much. Intelligence gives us skill damage, which we care about a lot. And willpower gives us generation of essence. So for this blood build, we like int and willpower. You could probably even put a 50-50 priority split between the two. There are going to be some breakpoints later on for willpower where you will want to have a lot of willpower. It's just int is going to be a little bit more accessible as we run through these boards. We move up into our first board, which is Blood Bath. The two blood boards are very good for blood, of course. We're going to come up here from below and go left to the glyph slot, give scaling to magic nodes, and then blood orbs fortify you for 1% of max life. We spawn blood orbs constantly with hemorrhage, with blood wave, with extra procs. If you run corpse tendrils, you'll have even more blood orbs spawning. And when you consume it, not only does it heal you, but you get fortify, which makes you do more damage and keeps you healthier longer. We love to see that. Increasing the magic nodes is great here because it'll increase your healing received plus more willpower, which is great. And it also increased damage while fortified. So all of this synergizes together. And we're going to exit by picking up some willpower here and going over to the left. But because Bloodbath is our primary board, we do want to stick around and get as many of these points that we possibly can. Things like dealing damage while healthy, percent scaling for overpowered damage that will trigger a lot, as well as some extra percent on that as well. Damage while fortified, fortified generation. Anytime you can find fortified generation as a percentage in fortified builds, it's massive because it has such a good throughput increase for the amount of fortify you bring in and makes the build feel better. We also want resistance and some extra damage reduction on that as well. And percent life is huge, as well as damage while fortified. So all of these nodes are very good for this build. And lastly, for Bloodbath, attacks that are guaranteed to overpower deal increased overpower damage. This means that when you're healthy for 15 seconds off your Rathma's key passive, those will deal increased overpower damage. And if you decide to, you want the guaranteed overpower from things like the Supernatural Blood Lance, and you don't want the reduction on Essence, this one could also scale up that damage, though I do have a feeling that the 3 Essence cost reduction per Blood Lance is going to be superior, but maybe I'm wrong on that one. Then, since we're on the left side of the board, it makes perfect sense to cut over to the left. We're going to go into Blood Begets Blood, which is the other blood board. Super nice pickups here. We want damage while healthy, and we want some damage and overpower damage. Overpower damage is huge for us. We love having that. And we can also go for more of an intelligence-based build that's skill-based, though with a spammy overpower build, I'd rather have resource generation and tankiness rather than just pure overpower damage for int plus skill damage. Come down here and get the glyph Dominate. Increases your overpower damage. If you have 25 willpower in the glyph range, when you overpower an enemy, all damage they take from you is increased, which is huge. And we also get Blood Orb Healing, willpower, overpower damage. All these things work really well together. Since we're down on the bottom, we're also going to pick up Blood Orbs grant increased damage up to 15% for 5. So when you ult, you spawn 3 Blood Orbs guaranteed. You pick up those Blood Orbs, you get Fortify, you heal yourself, you get damage increase, and then you have that for 5 seconds, and then your ultimate becomes even stronger because it increases your damage that way. And then the Blood Orbs you spawn regularly, you'll be able to take advantage of as well. Since we're on the bottom here, we're going to cut down into Flesh Eater. I think you could probably run Bone Graft if you really wanted to, but I think Flesh Eater probably has the best options because it gives you some takiness down here. We're going to cut down and we're going to pick up damage to injured enemies and some crit damage. It's just kind of extra little bit here. This just helps you kill bosses because they'll be injured for longer periods of time. And then we cut over here and we're going to get damage to elites. We're going to get a little more intelligence. We're also going to get some resistance and defense here. And then we can also pick up the Amplify, which grants magic orbs or magic nodes here an increase, which gives us more defense. And then enemies affected by curse skills take 10% increased damage. So since you're going to be marking everyone with Iron Maiden in this build, you'll get an extra little bit of damage increase from this. Now keep in mind, if you decide not to run with an Iron Maiden in your build, you can probably just go for Bone Graft and get some extra damage there. You can go for Hulking Monstrosity and get some self-defense and potion healing if you really wanted to, or come down here and pick up this potion healing. Very easy to pick up there, but if you do run with Iron Maiden, there's an option here to pick that up. Plenty of choices to be made. This is just a starter build for that. That's the Crimson Impaler build. It focuses on Blood Lance, overpower. This one's super satisfying if you want to feel like you're a minigun or a chain gun throwing Blood Lances all over the screen. And it gets better and better the better gear you get towards endgame. If you found value in the video, leave a like down below, comment, let me know what you think of the build or how you would run this build, or if you're running this build for launch, let me know that as well. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.